The palace walls did not just stand, they hummed with a low, biting vibration that rattled in the marrow, her lungs burning with every inhalation of the needle-sharp air. She moved deeper into the hall, where the light refracted in jagged, disorienting patterns across the floor. There, in the center of the vast, hollow chamber, sat Kai. He was hunched over a pile of ice shards, his fingers moving with a mechanical, repetitive rhythm as he tried to force the fragments into a perfect square. He did not look up. He did not acknowledge the sound of her boots clicking against the frozen stone. Gerda stepped closer, her movements restricted by the sheer density of the cold. She grabbed his hand, but he pulled away, his fingers stiff and drained of all warmth. They were blue, hard as the ice he played with. She knelt beside him, the frost biting into her knees, and pressed her palms against his cold cheeks. He stared past her, his gaze fixed on the empty air, completely unaware of her presence. The silence of the palace pressed in, heavy and absolute. Gerda leaned into his space, her breath hitching in the frigid air. "Kai, look at me," she whispered. Her voice trembled, a thin sound against the crushing silence of the hall. He did not respond. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, unblinking, reflecting nothing but the sterile light of the ice. She reached out, gripping his shoulders, and shook him. She expected his head to loll, or for him to protest, but his body was as rigid as stone. He did not sway. He did not shift his weight. He sat like a statue carved from the very frost that dominated the room. Panic flared in her chest, sharp and immediate. She shook him again, harder this time, her fingers digging into his frame, yet he remained locked in his trance. The indifference was worse than any refusal. He simply existed in a world where she no longer held a place. Desperation surged. She pulled him into a tight embrace, burying her face against his chest, while the walls around them continued their low, rhythmic hum. She was holding him, but he was not there. The cold seeped into her, but she did not let go. She pressed her face harder against his chest, her heart hammering against the silence. Hot tears spilled from her eyes, rolling down her cheeks and soaking into the fabric over his heart. One heavy, scalding droplet struck the center of his chest. It sizzled. The sound was minute, but in the absolute quiet of the hall, it snapped like a whip. Kai gasped. His body jolted, a violent, spasmodic twitch that shook him from his seat. The jagged ice shards he had been clutching clattered to the floor, scattering across the stone with a sharp, crystalline ringing. He blinked, his lids fluttering as if fighting off a heavy weight. A sharp, clear splinter of glass slid from the corner of his eye, falling to the ground and shattering into dust. His gaze shifted, the vacant fog lifting. He looked down, his eyes watering, and locked onto her face. The recognition hit him with the force of a physical blow. "Gerda," he choked out. The name was raw, a sound he had not formed in an eternity. He reached up, his fingers trembling, and clutched at her with desperate strength. The ice was gone. They stood together, ignoring the biting cold that clung to the hall like a persistent shadow. Kai gripped her hand, his fingers finally warm and responsive against hers. There was no time for words. The palace seemed to shrink around them, the towering ice walls humming with a sudden, aggressive vibration. They turned and sprinted, boots skidding against the slick, frosted floor. They reached the massive gates, pushing against the heavy slabs until they groaned and swung outward, spilling a blinding white light into the corridor. The wind hit them instantly, sharp as a blade, but it was a welcome relief from the tomb-like stillness of the interior. They scrambled out, lungs burning, and saw the creature waiting in the swirling snow. They leaped onto its back, fingers locking into the coarse fur. The reindeer did not hesitate. It surged forward, hooves thundering against the hard, frozen tundra. Behind them, the palace began to fade into the white horizon, a jagged silhouette of ice losing its grip on the world. They kept moving, the rhythm of the gallop carrying them further away, leaving the domain of the cold far behind them as the landscape blurred into a streak of endless, rushing white. The endless white finally gave way to the soft, muted browns of the familiar valley. The reindeer slowed, its heavy breathing fogging the air before it came to a halt in the shadow of their home. They slid from its back, legs heavy and stiff from the long trek. Every step toward the door felt like waking from a long, feverish dream. The house stood silent, but as they rounded the corner toward the garden, the air changed. The biting sharpness of the tundra vanished, replaced by a faint, sweet scent of soil and damp earth. They looked up at the rooftop. The vines that had withered into brittle, gray stalks during the winter were now pulsing with color. Gerda reached out, touching the stem of a rose that had already begun to unfurl. It was deep, vibrant red, a stark contrast to the pale frost that had defined their lives for so long. Kai followed her gaze, his hand steady as he reached for the ladder. They climbed together, the wood groaning under their weight. They reached the top and sat down among the petals. The clouds overhead parted, washing away the last of the winter chill. They sat in the quiet,